Fujifilm, I have a confession to make. I've been having an affair. I've been cheating on you with Sony. I bought a Sony A7iii and I'm having a blast. And the truth is, Fujifilm, I want a divorce. I want a divorce from you. I want to be with Sony. I love Sony. 8 years ago, I switched to Fujifilm and got an X-T1. Before that, I was using a Nikon D7000 and that thing was a chonker. It was heavy, it was bulky, and whenever I wanted to travel with it, it just seemed like a lot. I even had a special strap that distributed the weight a little bit better just so I could carry it everywhere I wanted to go. So I decided to switch to a smaller camera, the Fujifilm X-T1, and I got the 35mm 1.4. I still got them original right here. Fantastic camera, fantastic lens, sharp, excellent picture quality. I was pretty happy with my X-T1, but then I broke it because I left an SD card in the one card slot for way too long and it melted on the inside, and when I tried to get it out, it busted a bunch of stuff and the SD card slot just stopped working. But I still got it because I love this camera. So I decided to get a newer Fujifilm camera and I got the X-T3. And while the X-T3 was better in a lot of ways, it was also kind of the same camera. No IBIS, the same small battery as the X-T1, but now it needed more computational power, so the battery sucked even worse. But the enhancements in the video quality were excellent in that camera, even though you could only record for 20 minutes until the battery ran out. But the thing it lacked is IBIS, which all the other camera companies were putting into their cameras. And with the X-T3, that little size of the camera was getting defeated because the X-T3 grew in size. And even this X-T4 is quite a chonker now. I mean, it's not a DSLR, but it has grown in size. I've been wanting to try full frame and curiosity got the best of me. And when I saw a Sony A7 III mint condition on eBay with less than 2,000 clicks for $1,000, I could not resist. I ordered it along with the trinity of my lenses, the 55mm f1.8, the Sony 85mm 1.8, and I got a compact lens, the 24mm 2.8G. I wasn't expecting much, honestly, but when I started shooting with the Sony, I was pretty floored. First of all, the eye autofocus is everything it lives up to be. So the X-T4 and X-T3, they had eye autofocus, but ask anyone who's used the camera system and it was pretty finicky at best. Sometimes it show up the square, sometimes it just go away randomly and haphazardly. You don't know if it was going to get it or not. And it was just something that you couldn't really trust. But with the Sony A7 III, the eye autofocus is godly. It locks onto the eye pretty much in every condition I've thrown it in a studio environment, outside, harsh backlighting, a lot of front lighting. It finds the eye and it just locks onto it. I'm getting so many more shots in focus and just trusting the eye autofocus, and it is game changing. It really changes the way that you shoot and take photos. It's just one less thing that you have to worry about. Instead of focus recompose or hoping the eye autofocus hits it, now you can completely rely on the eye autofocus and focus on the composition, and you can change around and move knowing that it's going to hit the eye and get critical eye focus. I love that about the Sony A7 III. Another big advantage is the battery life. So the X-T3, ask anyone who shot it, 400 shots and it's dying. The battery is on a chokehold. With video, 20 minutes maximum recording time and then the battery is dying or pretty much dead. With the Sony A7 III, with my first shoot, it was an indoor studio shot. I took 500 photos and the next day I took the battery out thinking I need to charge the battery. I put the camera on and it says 89% battery left. 89%. I took 500 shots. I was amazed. It was incredible. I didn't think that you could have that kind of battery life in a mirrorless camera. So that is astonishing to me. Even with the X-T4, it has a bigger battery. When you take 400, 500 shots, it's down to half or even 25%. Battery life is awesome on the Sony A7 III. The third awesome thing about the Sony A7 III that has the X-T3, 4, 5, all the Fujifilm cameras beat is the full frame sensor. The quality of the photos coming out of this camera is astonishing. Fujifilm, they take amazing sharp photos. They're awesome. But With the Sony, it's just like that extra little bit more sharper. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. The other day, I took a photo of myself and you can see the hairs above my eyebrow, the little tiny itty bitty hairs. You can see every single one of them with the Sony. Fujifilm can do that, but you have to bring it out with sharpening. With the Sony camera, you don't even have to sharpen it anymore. It is just sharp. It's just so sharp. You could even say it's too sharp. The Zeiss 55mm lens and the Sony 85mm lens are incredible. Even if you check it out on DxOMark, they're some of the most top-rated, sharpest lens out of all lenses created. And the bokeh that I get with the full-frame Sony camera is just beautiful for portraits. The whole face is sharp and the background just turns to complete butter. The Sony 85mm just looks amazing. You can do the same thing with the Fujifilm cameras, but you need longer lenses. I had the 90mm and that turned the background to butter, but you can get a similar look in the background with just the 85mm because of the crop and full frame sensor differences. The bokeh and that full frame look, quote unquote, is just beautiful with the Sony camera, especially for portraits. So for my use cases where I just want beautiful portraits and critical eye autofocus, the Sony is just really awesome. So with all of these pros, I hear a lot of people talk about how there are pros to the Fujifilm system, but some of those arguments I don't really get. The first one being is the Fujifilm cameras are smaller. I'm sitting here with the X-T4 right in front of me with the Sony A7 III, and they look pretty identical to me. If you look up online and see the actual dimensions, the Sony is actually a little less wide than the Fujifilm X-T4. It is a tiny bit heavier, but we're talking about 50 grams. It's negligible. But the thing that the Sony has that the Fujifilm cameras don't is an actually usable grip. Like you can just put your hand in here and lock onto it for hours and you're comfortable and it's awesome. Fujifilm cameras do not have that. I always have to buy third-party accessories. I got this little grip for the X-T4 just to give me a usable grip for my hand. Now you could argue once you put the lenses on it, that's where the differences are going to become clear, but we can compare right here. So here's the Fujifilm 56mm f1.2 and here's the Sony 85mm. I mean, it is almost identical. Look at that. And here I have the Fujifilm 35mm f1.4 and the Zeiss 55mm 1.8. Yeah, the Zeiss is a little bit longer, but it's not a major difference. And then we got the 14mm f1.4, which I can't show you because I'm recording with it right now. And here's the Sony G compact lens. It is a 2.8 to be fair, but it is one of the compact lenses that Sony has, and it has a similar look to the 14mm on crop sensor. So I don't see an advantage in size and weight with the Fujifilm cameras like a lot of people say there is. Another thing that people say Fujifilm does better than Sony is the color science or the skin tones. Color science is fake. It's not a real thing. It doesn't exist. It's not actually a science. It all comes down to the quantity and quality of light, white balance settings, and thousands of other things that affects colors. I can get the Sony cameras into Capture One and adjust them to how I want them to look. Doesn't really matter to me. I shoot raw. One advantage that I see is pretty clear is the video options and the video quality coming out of the Fujifilm camera. They're both pretty similar in terms of quality, but because of the way I work with my workflow, I don't do F-log or anything like that. It's easier to get something that's captured on the Fujifilm camera quicker and being able to edit and produce compared to the Sony camera. You have to fiddle around with the Sony picture profiles a little bit more and adjust the color a little bit more in the editing compared to the Fujifilm camera. But at the end of the day, that can come down to preferences and it's subjective. Maybe you really like the look of the Sony video files compared to the Fuji files. Maybe it's because I've been using Fujifilm for 8 years, but I like the quality and the colors straight out of the camera when I'm doing video for Fujifilm. Let's talk ergonomics and menu systems of these two cameras. The philosophy is different. Fujifilm cameras are kind of like old school film cameras where you got the dials on the top and you can click and change shutter speed, ISO, and aperture right on the lens. The Sony camera adopts a DSLR-like system where everything can be changed with knobs in the back, front, and a dial on the back. One isn't necessarily better than the other, it's just different philosophies. With Fujifilm cameras, you take your time. You go and you check your settings, you adjust things based on the scene, and you can see your settings right with physical dials right there, so you know what your settings are before you turn it on and shoot. But one thing that's a little annoying with the Fujifilm camera is you put it up to your eye and you want to go and adjust some settings. Of course, you can do that with your hand, but then you're doing a maneuver like this, where you have your hand over here and you're clicking over here, and then You got to get your finger off the shutter button. You got to switch the shutter speed over here. Sometimes you'll have to look down and then look at the physical knobs and switch those things. You can see it in the screen, but you just go back to that analog experience. It's kind of second nature. Contrast that with the Sony camera where everything is with your right hand. Being able to change all the settings with your right hand without moving your eye from the viewfinder leaves your left hand open to do other things, such as changing flash power on a flash trigger, or a lot of times with portraits, I'll hold a reflector out while I'm taking a photo of a person just to put it under their eye and give them a little bit of bounce and fill in the shadows. I can do that with this camera and still adjust all the settings with my right hand. It's efficient and faster. I can't do that with the Fujifilm. If I want to adjust the ISO, I gotta put it down. If I got a reflector on my left hand, I gotta put it down, I gotta change it, pick up the reflector, go back, readjust everything. It's more efficient and faster on the Sony system. It's just different ways of thinking to do the same things. One of them is a little more methodical, a little more analog. The other one is faster and more efficient. On the topic of efficiency, the Sony menu system is not as bad as a lot of people have made it out to be. Only took me a week to familiarize myself with all the menus and where everything is roughly in the menu systems on the Sony camera. And now I set everything to go on the FN button. 99% of the time I can get to what I want and change the settings that I want just with this little button here. But the speed of changing settings and going into the menu system is more sluggish compared to the Fujifilm camera. Whenever I adjust shutter speed or aperture, it takes kind of a quarter to a half a second until it actually registers on the camera, which feels sluggish. When I click the menu system, it takes a quarter of a second to go into it. When I click the playback button, it takes a quarter of a second to go to it. And you think that the interface would be a little bit quicker and snappier for such an expensive camera. Now, the one thing that is not slow in the Sony A7 III is the autofocus. When you hold your finger down, boom, it goes in, it clicks, it autofocuses, it grabs that eye, it's fast and speedy. Contrast that with the Fujifilm, and you have that click of the analog right here. And if you look at it on the screen, it's switching almost instantaneously. It's fast, speedy, and responsive whenever you change the ISO, shutter speed, or aperture. You click the menu button, it goes right into the menu. It doesn't feel laggy at all. Just go through, change settings, and it's speedier. It's the speedier system to use, which is funny because overall changing settings the analog way is slower, but the menu system and interface is faster than the Sony A7 III. It's not a big deal, but when you're used to the speediness of a system like the Fujifilm, it does wear on you a little bit. But the one thing that is grating is the time it takes from when you turn the camera on to when you can actually take a photo. With the Fujifilm, you turn it on, you're ready to snap, boom, take the picture. The Sony, you turn it on, and you gotta wait maybe 2-3 seconds until you take a photo. And most of the time, I'll shut the camera off to preserve battery life after I've taken a bunch of photos. Sometimes there's a moment that's happening, I wanna turn the camera on and go and take a picture quickly, and I gotta wait around 3 seconds for it to initialize and turn on. That is a negative for the Sony system. The interface is a touch slower compared to the Fujifilm. Yeah, that is why I am really digging the Sony A7 III. I feel like the pros of the Sony system are just incredible and outweigh the pros of the Fujifilm system. It's full frame, better battery life, better eye autofocus, super sharp photos. I am loving the Sony system. The A7 III does not have a flippy screen, and I need that because I record myself a ton. But once I get the A7 IV with the flippy screen, I think I'm pretty much gonna completely switch over to Sony. When it comes down to a more reasonable used price, I don't need the latest and greatest. I can wait for the prices to come down and snatch one up and be completely happy. If you'd like to join in on this conversation, go ahead and leave a comment below. Tell us why you like Sony better, or if you like Fuji better, go ahead and tell us why you like Fuji better. Tell me what you think of my reasons and tell me your reasons why you switched to a system. Or you similar to me, where you're brand agnostic and you just choose whatever works best for your workflow and for picture quality. To me, there's a lot of subjective reasons why Sony is better, but I think there's more objective reasons why the Sony system is better. If you loved this video, click like and subscribe if you want to see more videos of me talking about camera systems, photography, and I do POV behind the scenes shoots that I share with you on this channel. So if you want to check them out and continue watching them, go ahead and subscribe.